Good afternoon. Welcome to Korea this week. To this episode, I'm your host, Saint Kim, and today we're joined by Phil Eskeland, our Executive Director for Policy and Operations at KEI. So thank you for joining us, Phil.
Thank you for having me again.
Great. So we have a lot to update you from last week's episode. So let's start with the U.S. North Korea's second summit. So we didn't have the exact date and location last week, but we have at least the date and the location now. So the President Trump will meet Chairman Kim Jong-un on February 27th to 28th in Vietnam, especially Hanoi. But there were different cities that were mentioned, right? So Phil, could you tell us what were the other options and why two sides preferred different cities?
Yeah, the United States was pushing for Da Nang, Vietnam, in sort of the central region. I think they preferred that because it was more secluded and for security purposes. And also perhaps for Trump to show Kim Jong-un a vision of what you could do with some beach property.
I heard it's beautiful.
Yes.
Over there. Yeah.
It's a beautiful area of Vietnam. So, but the U.S. made a small concession to North Korea in agreeing to having the summit meeting in Hanoi, probably because North Korea wanted to be close to its embassy to support Kim Jong-un, and also to be closer to the Vietnamese leadership. Perhaps this would be an opportunity for Kim Jong-un to meet with senior Vietnamese leadership, and hopefully they can discuss how Vietnam transitioned from being an enemy of the United States to now being friendly with the United States, even though Vietnam is not a democratic country.
Mm-hmm. Right. So obviously this is a huge opportunity for Vietnam as well. So following up on announcement on the location and the dates, President Trump also tweeted that North Korea under Kim's leadership will become a great economic powerhouse, right? So this sounds like he's hinting something here. So could you tell us a little bit about what economic powerhouse that he's referring to, what this could mean in terms of North Korea in economic development?
Well, I think it's hinting at what President Trump believes could evolve in North Korea if it takes the right path. It has a lot of basic foundational good things about the country in terms of it's very rich in mineral. It's got an educated workforce. It's at the crossroads between major powers, gateway to China, and it has a great economic potential, but the only thing that's holding it back is its belligerence in the past and its threats of nuclear annihilation. So he's holding out various economic incentives to persuade North Korea to give up its nuclear weapons. And we also got a little hint of this too, which the President Trump's nominee to head the World Bank, David Malpass, hinted also when he was in South Korea that the World Bank could help out with North Korea. So again, this also justifies the rationale for having this summit meeting in Vietnam, because Vietnam took a similar path in the late 80s and early 90s where it left its more purely communistic or socialist paths and opened up its economy. And it's doing much better now, and it's a member of the international community, and North Korea can do the same thing.
Mm-hmm. And of course, there are multiple layers of sanctions involved, and it seems that if there is a significant steps from North Korea, I think the United States as well as other countries are willing to at least lift some of the sanctions in order for the economic development to happen, right?
Yes. So it's a very delicate balancing act that President Trump has to take, because there are some that would want a faster movement towards sanction relief in return for more dismantlement of North Korea's nuclear infrastructure. That would be like China and Russia.
Right.
But then he's also got to balance some other forces, including the U.S. Congress, in which Congress has stated on numerous occasions that there'd be no sanctions relief until North Korea completely denuclearizes. So it's going to be very sensitive for how President Trump handles these talks.
Right. And also, leading up to the summit, there are a lot of logistical things and a lot of details to be sorted out even before the summit. So the Special Representative Steve Biegun went to North Korea last week. Actually, we mentioned that he was in South Korea last week when we did the episode, and then he was in Pyongyang on Wednesday after that. So he spent 3 days there. So that's a lot than what it seems like what most people expected. Do we know anything about what he might have discussed with the North Korean counterparts?
No, it's all speculation, but maybe the decision on Hanoi was made there. But this is all speculation.
Right.
But there's still, good news to report on this front, in which there's going to be another meeting in some undisclosed third country in Asia to further the logistical arrangements for this summit meeting. So those are good signs as well.
Yeah, because we're only about 2 weeks before the actual summit, so there are a lot of details in terms of like agenda and many, many other things to be discussed. So we'll keep you updated on the things coming up and also the summit. And I do want to mention the public opinion in South Korea for a little bit. So there's an article that reported the survey by the Real Meter. They surveyed about 500 or so. So the sample is pretty small, but it seems like 62% of South Koreans are optimistic about the second Trump-Kim summit, and about 35% of them voiced negative views. So they were worried that the summit could weaken the alliance between the South Korea and the United States, and there is without having any tangible results from denuclearization. But it seems overall, at least for now, that South Koreans are positive about the second summit.
Okay.
So next, I do want to go update you on the SMA, the Special Measures Agreement that we talked about last week. We talked about how it was close to getting it signed, and it was signed on Sunday, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, Phil, could you tell us a little bit about what was actually agreed and what they signed on?
Well, they agreed on a one-year package where South Korea would increase its contribution in burden sharing by about
8.2%.
8.2%.
Right.
So it crossed the 1 trillion won level for South Korea, which is a psychological barrier that they had to cross. But it didn't cross the $1 billion US dollar barrier. But the problem is it's only for 1 year, and then at the same time, the U.S. is going to be negotiating with Japan later this year on their special measures agreement.
Right.
So, but now this would mean that Korea pays about half the cost of stationing U.S. troops on the peninsula, and it was important that we reach this agreement because if something wasn't reached by April 15th, then the Korean workers on U.S. military bases would have been furloughed. So that wouldn't have been a good thing.
Right.
But but we shouldn't measure South Korea's contributions to the alliance solely in terms of burden sharing. They paid for about 90% of the cost of moving our forces down to Camp Humphreys and building a huge military base. In fact, it's probably the largest military base, U.S. military base in the world now. They contribute 2.6% of their GDP to their own defense. That's higher than any other NATO country. And they purchase most of their weapons from the United States, so they're on track to buy the F-35 fighter and other expensive pieces of U.S. military equipment. So they're a good strategic ally of the United States.
Right. So they've signed it, but it also has to go through multiple process, especially in South Korea, right? So it has to go through the cabinet members and also President Moon for approval, and then it has to be ratified by the National Assembly, probably around April. And given the current political divide in South Korea, I think it might be facing a tough time getting ratified in April. But in terms of the U.S., does it have to go through any of the congressional approval at all?
No, because it involves no appropriation by the United States. It's just that there have been several members of Congress closely following this, and I saw Congresswoman Grace Meng send a letter saying that to push quicker action on this issue and not require 100% increase in South Korea's contribution. So in that sense, it worked out well. But I'm also optimistic about the passage in the Korean National Assembly, because I've seen some news stories where there was positive statements from various conservative members of the National Assembly, and also from the President Moon's own party was positive about it. So it's not the ideal agreement, but at least postpones any friction in the alliance, particularly right before the upcoming summit meeting.
Right, timing is really important. They definitely don't want to have this continue before the summit. So we'll definitely see more on that news. Lastly, I do want to talk about the trade relations. And Phil, you mentioned the trade statistics. Of course, the North Korea issues are important, but also there is the ongoing trade issues, and trade relations is really important when it comes to the relationship between two countries, and also how that affects the security as well. So, Phil, could you tell us about the latest trade statistics between the U.S. and South Korea?
Well, due to the furlough, the trade statistics were delayed in their release. So last week, November's statistics came out, and it showed that year-to-date, the bilateral trade deficit in goods and services between the U.S. and South Korea dropped by 26%.
That's a lot.
Yes, and that's on top of a decrease from the previous year.
Right.
And actually, U.S. exports eclipsed $50 billion. Wow. So that's a record level even before the year is over. And that's due in part to the large amount of oil and gas products that Korea is buying. And then in terms of countries that maybe President Trump should worry about, if a trade deficit is your main metric, Korea dropped to 12th place in terms of countries with the largest trade deficit. So, I mean, the U.S. has a bigger trade deficit with Thailand than Korea.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, if he wants to focus on reducing the trade deficit, Korea is doing its part. The other issue that came up on Friday was a ruling from the World Trade Organization. And it's actually an amazing ruling because for the first time, the World Trade Organization is allowing another country to impose higher tariffs on the United States for how it calculates anti-dumping and countervailing duty margins and duties. So the U.S. had an anti-dumping case and countervailing duty case against Korea washing machine manufacturers back in 2013, and Korea objected, and it won its case in 2016, and the WTO gave the U.S. a year to remedy the situation. The U.S. didn't. So now the arbitration board there at the WTO is allowing Korea to impose up to $85 million in tariffs.
Wow.
Now, Korea had sought a higher level, but still this is very symbolic because the U.S. has anti-dumping and countervailing duties orders against 49 other countries. Wow. And Korea is number 3 on that list after China and Brazil. And most of those affect the steel industry. So, I mean, this could have major implications for reviewing all those anti-dumping and countervailing duty orders, and then ultimately could impact the president's decisions on the 232 with regard to steel and aluminum.
Right.
Because that was kind of arbitrary how that was calculated. Mm-hmm. So the concern, though, is what would be the Trump administration's reaction to it. And based on past statements, they're not going to be happy with it. And it could have implications for how the U.S. looks at and treats the WTO in the future.
Right, and this is all buried in the North Korea and summit issue. So, I mean, this is a major
yeah, because Korea achieved a major victory in international trade laws. And, yeah, it's hardly getting any coverage.
Right. So you heard it first from our show. We'll definitely hear more about it because it literally came out on Friday, right? Friday
Yes.
late afternoon, I believe. So there will be more articles and more news coverage on this issues from both sides, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely keep an eye on the news, and we'll tell you more as we hear more. Is there anything else that you'd like to mention, especially on like the 232?
Yeah. So last year, the Commerce Department initiated an investigation on the national security implications of imported motor vehicles and parts. And the Commerce Department has 270 days by statute to release its report. And that deadline is coming up quickly, February 24th.
Wow.
So a decision could be released, or the study, I should say, could be released next week because February 24th is a Sunday. Mm-hmm. So we'd be curious to see if this report is actually released, because then the president has another 3 months or so to make a decision on imposing tariffs, if that's what the study recommends. So again, maybe many people think this is being used as leverage in various trade talks. So, I mean, he's resolved the issue with Canada and Mexico, but he's initiated talks with the European Union and Japan. So the European Union is kind of resistant on including agriculture in trade talks. So maybe President Trump will decide to threaten higher tariffs on Europe's cars unless they do something on agriculture. But the problem is everyone keeps forgetting Korea.
Right.
In all this. So, I mean, Korea renegotiated its trade agreement with the U.S. that included autos. There's 0 tariffs between each country on motor vehicles. So Korea should be exempt from all this because it did everything that it wanted to do. So that's why it'd be interesting to see how Korea deals with this WTO decision, whether it's going to impose tariffs on some U.S. products for the washing machine issue. And the U.S. may threaten tariffs on Korean cars, so we'll see what happens.
Right. Thank you for your insights on the trade and also the important trade issues. I mean, North Korea is important, but also we have to keep an eye on the trade issues as well. So that's it for today. So I do want to mention upcoming KEI event. So on February 26th, we're hosting Dr. Moon Jung-in, who is the special advisor to President Moon Jae-in on foreign affairs and national security. He will talk about, obviously, the second U.S. North Korea summit, which is literally happening the day or a few hours after our event. So that's February 26th, Tuesday at noon. You can come to our office to see it live, but we'll also be live streaming online on our YouTube page in case you can't physically be here. So thank you so much for watching. And next week is a holiday. So President's Day is on Monday, 28th, right?
No.
What day is it? Next Monday. So we'll be live on Tuesday at 2 p.m. So anything else you want to add, Phil?
Nope.
No? Okay. All right. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Bye.
Bye now.